Welcome to this explainer. Okay, have you ever wondered how you actually force a massive, traditionally secretive bureaucracy to just answer your questions? Today, we're unpacking the fundamental problem of democratic accountability. We'll look at how specific laws can literally act as both your sword and your shield. We're getting right into the core of how our government interacts with us, its people, focusing specifically on India's landmark Right to Information Act and the rollout of citizen charters.
Let's dive right in with a simple but honestly profound question. When decisions are made about massive chunks of public funds, or when local administration policies are drafted, what exactly happens behind closed doors? And more importantly, who actually gets to know about it? For a long time, the answer was, well, not you. The inner workings of the state were treated as these highly privileged secrets. But in a true democracy, that simply can't fly.
Which brings us to Section 1, the Pillars of Democracy.
Transparency. Now, this isn't just some corporate buzzword. It's the absolute foundational mechanism of a free society. Transparency is simply the openness and accessibility of governmental actions. It's the engine that ensures public scrutiny, prevents corruption by shining a light into the shadows where abuse of power usually hides, and allows for us to actually participate as informed citizens.
And this quote right here brilliantly illustrates the constitutional weight behind the whole concept. The Supreme Court of India, in the famous case of State of UP versus Raj Narain, made it clear the people have a right to know every public act performed by public functionaries. This links your right to know directly to your fundamental freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. Because think about it, how can you meaningfully exercise your freedom of expression if you're deliberately kept in the dark about what your own government is doing?
So we've seen a massive historical shift here. Before 2005, we lived in an era of dominant secrecy. The bureaucracy basically held all the cards, and getting access to information was incredibly tough. But post-2005, we entered an era of statutory openness. This was a real game changer. It completely transformed the citizen-government relationship, shifting that power dynamic right back where it belongs, toward the public. Let's look closer at how that happened in Section 2, the RTI Act Demystified. First things first, what exactly are you allowed to ask for? Imagine you want to see a local government construction contract, or say you need to dig up a public official's email about a zoning dispute. Well, under the RTI Act, all of those tangible items, records, memos, circulars, reports, electronic data, the whole shebang fall exactly under the legal definition of information that you have a statutory right to request. It takes this abstract idea of transparency and makes it incredibly specific and actionable.
The crucial part is understanding how to actually use it. If you want this information, you don't just yell into the void, right? Step 1, you submit a formal request to a designated Public Information Officer, or PIO. But what if they ignore you, or just unfairly deny your request? The law actually builds in a ladder for you. Step 2 is filing a first appeal. And if that fails, Step 3 allows you to escalate the whole thing to the independent central or state information commissions. You have a legally structured path to fight back.
Now, you might be thinking, sure, I can ask, but they're just going to make me wait for years. Well, actually, no. In a pretty rare twist for bureaucracy, the law forces administrative efficiency. The government generally has exactly 30 days to reply, just 30 days. That strict deadline prevents officials from using endless bureaucratic delays as a weapon to keep things secret. But wait, it gets even more intense. If your request involves urgent matters of life or liberty, say an unlawful detention or some immediate threat to physical safety, that 30-day timeline drops dramatically to just 48 hours. 48 hours? This injects serious urgency into the system and proves just how powerful the act can be in critical, real-world situations. Of course, openness does have practical limits. The RTI Act is powerful, absolutely, but it isn't absolute. The government can legally exempt certain sensitive categories from disclosure. We're talking about things like national security, foreign relations, delicate cabinet papers, personal privacy, and trade secrets. It's a balancing act, ensuring the government is open to us without recklessly exposing critical vulnerabilities. Moving on to Section 3, Understanding Citizen Charters. So, if the RTI Act is your sword to pierce through secrecy and extract information, the Citizen Charter acts as your shield. Originating over in the UK and later adopted in India, these are public documents that clearly define the exact services a public authority provides, the standards you should expect from them, and the grievance mechanisms available to you. Think of it as a public promise of service quality. A proper citizen charter demands very specific obligations: transparency, time-bound service delivery, and, crucially, courtesy and responsiveness. These formal obligations mean that public authorities are required to treat citizens fairly, respectfully, and provide effective complaint resolution, an accessible grievance mechanism when things inevitably go wrong. It legally pushes the administration to be truly citizen-centric.
And the Supreme Court has backed this up. In the case of Common Cause versus Union of India, the court explicitly noted that these charters are vital for building public trust and ensuring accountability. Now, I do need to point out a major limitation here. Unlike the RTI Act, citizen charters currently lack strict legal enforceability in a lot of departments. But despite that, judicial recognition proves they are an essential baseline for defining exactly how a government must treat its people.
Which brings us to Section 4, Hurdles to True Transparency.
Because, let's be real, the legal promise often crashes hard into reality. So what's going wrong on the ground? Well, we constantly see a traditional bureaucratic culture of secrecy fighting back. This shows up as deliberate administrative delays and massive backlogs. There's also a severe lack of awareness, particularly in rural areas. Add to that incredibly poor record management, physical files literally getting lost in basements, and public officials actively misusing those exemptions we just talked about to wrongly deny completely valid requests.
And on a much more serious note, demanding transparency can actually be dangerous for those exposing corruption. RTI activists sometimes face severe intimidation, harassment, and even violence. This chilling effect is heavily compounded by systemic failures, empty seats in information commissions causing massive appeal delays, and a really frustrating lack of effective penalties enforced against defaulting officials. When bad actors aren't punished, the whole system weakens.
But despite these severe institutional hurdles, our courts do continually strive to protect the spirit of the law. In Reserve Bank of India versus Gentilal and Mistry, the Supreme Court legally reinforced that the scope of government secrecy must remain exceptionally limited. The courts are constantly playing this delicate balancing act, protecting necessary privacy while making sure those exemptions don't just swallow the overarching rule of transparency.
And that brings us to our final point in this explainer. Ultimately, laws like the RTI Act and frameworks like citizen charters are incredibly powerful instruments meant to protect your democratic rights. They're designed to prevent corruption and ensure good governance. But a law is only as strong as its enforcement. They only fulfill their promise if you, the citizen, overcome the hurdles, ask the tough questions, and demand accountability. So my question to you is, will you step up and use your right to know?